My name is James, and I live in a small, quiet town called New Wimberley. It's the kind of place where everyone knows each other and nothing much ever happens. But that all changed one early August morning, the first day of school. Unfortunately, I was held back a year, so I had to return as a 19-year-old senior. In a small town like mine, the middle school and high school are in the same building, so I knew most of the kids already. It was a small school, so it wasn't unusual to recognize every face in the hallways. That day, my first period was study hall. I walked into the classroom, expecting the usual group of students, but something was different. There was a new kid sitting alone on the other side of the room. He seemed out of place, like he didn't belong there. I figured he must be new, so I decided to go over and introduce myself. "Hey, I'm James," I said, trying to be friendly. He looked up at me with a strange expression, like he was sizing me up. "I'm Steven," he replied. "I just moved here." I offered to show him around the school, and he accepted. As we walked through the hallways, pointing out classrooms and the cafeteria, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about him. At first, his questions were normal. He asked how long I'd been at the school and where our classrooms were. But then his questions took a strange turn. "What's your address?" he asked out of nowhere. I stopped in my tracks, surprised. It was a weird question, especially from someone I had just met. "Why do you want to know my address?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. He spoke, "Just curious." I decided not to give him my address, but I figured it wouldn't hurt to give him my Snapchat ID, so I did. After that, I tried to put the whole scenario out of my mind and went on with my day. The last period of the day was English class. When I walked in, I noticed that there were only about 9 kids in the room. It was the lowest level English class, so I wasn't surprised that it was small. I took my seat and started getting ready for class when I noticed Steven sitting on the other side of the room. He was eating a disgusting looking sandwich, but that wasn't the weirdest part. He was staring right at me. He gestured for me to come over to him, but I ignored him. Mr. Adam, our English teacher, was about to start the lesson, and I didn't want to get into trouble. But Steven didn't stop. A few minutes later, I glanced up from my book and saw him staring at me again, this time with a look of anger on his face. He gestured for me to come over again, but I pretended not to notice and kept reading. Then my phone pinged. It was a Snapchat message from Steven. "Follow me," it said. I quickly replied, "I can't, we're in the middle of class." Steven didn't respond. Instead, he got up from his seat and asked Mr. Adam if he could go to the bathroom. Once he left the room, I couldn't help but wonder what he was up to. After a few minutes, my curiosity got the better of me, so I asked Mr. Adam if I could go to the bathroom too. I stepped into the hallway, but Steven was nowhere in sight. I walked down each hallway, trying to find him. And eventually I spotted him about 50 feet away, walking slowly. I kept my distance so he wouldn't know I was following him. He turned down a hallway that wasn't used much. It was mostly for storage, bathrooms and offices. Then I saw him open a door and walk inside. He closed the door behind him, and I realized it was the door to the school's basement. My heart started pounding in my chest. There was no way I was going down there. The basement was dark, creepy and full of old, forgotten things. I turned around and headed back to class, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling in my gut. When I got back to the classroom, my phone pinged again. It was another message from Steven. "Why didn't you come to the basement?" he asked. He followed up with a picture of himself, still eating that gross sandwich, but this time he was in the basement. The final message sent a chill down my spine. "Come down here." At that point, I was really creeped out. I replied, telling him to leave me alone. Then I blocked him. For the rest of the day, I couldn't stop thinking about Steven and why he wanted me to go into that basement. Later that night, I tried to distract myself by focusing on my homework. Before I knew it, it was 11 p.m. and I was finally done. I was home alone and the house was quiet. Just as I was about to put my homework away, my phone buzzed with a notification. Someone had added me on Snapchat. The username sent a shiver down my spine. "Why didn't you enter the basement?" It was Steven. I blocked the account immediately, but a few minutes later, I got another friend request. This time the username was, "Why did you block me?" I blocked that one too, but another request came almost instantly. The username was even more unsettling. I know where you live. And then the final message that made my blood run cold. I'm right outside your house. Right after I read that, I heard the sound of glass shattering downstairs. Panic arrived through me as I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. My hands were shaking as I told the operator what was happening. She told me to find a safe place to hide and lock the door. I hung up and quickly ran to the hallway closet. I squeezed inside, trying to make myself as small as possible. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. Then I heard footsteps. They started downstairs but quickly moved to the second floor. I could hear the floor creaking as someone walked down the hallway, getting closer to the closet. I held my breath and peeked through the small crack in the closet door. My blood ran cold when I saw him. It was Steven. He was standing at the end of the hallway, staring straight ahead into the darkness. He didn't seem to notice me, but then, as if sensing something, he slowly turned his head and looked right at the closet door. I quickly pulled back, pressing myself against the back wall of the closet. I could hear him moving closer, his footsteps getting louder. I held my breath, praying he wouldn't find me. I thought he wouldn't leave. But then the door closed, and I heard his footsteps moving away, back down the hallway. I waited, my heart still racing, until I heard the sound of sirens outside. The police had arrived. I stayed hidden for a few more seconds, just to be sure, and then I carefully opened the closet door. I ran downstairs and flung open the front door, nearly collapsing in relief when I saw the police officer standing on my front yard. I quickly told them what had happened, but by the time they searched the house, Steven was gone. There was no sign of him anywhere. They found out that he had escaped through a window in the basement. The police took down the information about the Snapchat accounts, promising to do their best to trace them. But I knew that finding him wouldn't be easy. The next day I went to school and immediately went to the principal's office to report Steven. But what the principal told me was the most chilling thing of all. He looked at me with a confused expression and said, "James, there's no student named Steven at this school. We have no records of anyone by that name." I felt a cold chill run down my spine. They checked the security cameras, and what they found was even more disturbing. The footage showed Steven sneaking in through a back entrance of the school, blending in with the other students. He had never been a student there at all. He was just a stranger who had somehow managed to infiltrate our school. After that, I never saw Steven again. The police never found him, and I never got any more creepy messages on Snapchat. But to this day, I still think about that night. I still wonder what would have happened if I had followed him into the basement. All I know is that Steven was probably the most dangerous person I have ever met, and I don't want to imagine what his intentions were.